So what I'd like to do is talk about hand painting this texture. And I know that I'm in ZBrush right now, but I feel like I'm not going to use poly paint. Instead, I'm going to use Substance Painter. The reason that I'm in ZBrush is because I want to make sure to show how to get the character, from ZBrush to Substance Painter. The other thing is you might be saying, well, wait a minute, you could poly paint in ZBrush. And I feel like I don't want to do that because I'm only getting color information when I do that. And in Substance Painter, I can get roughness maps, and I feel like it's going to be far superior to what I can do in ZBrush. So to get started, I'm going to go to level 1. I'm going to say export, and I'm just going to call this, you can see that I have Substance Painter character, and then in the ZBrush, I'm going to call this obj underscore L1 for level 1. And then I'm going to go to the highest level, and I'm going to kind of even disregard his eyes. I'm going to say export. I'm going to call this obj L6 for the high resolution, so level 6. And in the subtools, so I'm just going to let that think there, and I'll pause the video. Okay, and so that took maybe a couple minutes to save the high resolution. And you know what? I think I will have his eyes, just so you can kind of see how to do that. So if I have separate objects, you can see here I've got separate objects for the eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export these out as well. So let me take a look here. Okay, and the other eye. Okay, and it looks like the other eye is super dense, and this eye is super, not dense. So I think what I'll do is I'm just going to delete this eye real quick. And I'll take this eye and I'm going to duplicate it. And I want to mirror this, so I can come down here. I'm just going to go to, let's see here, deformation, mirroring. Okay, so it says it has multiple subdivisions. I think, okay, I'm just going to delete the higher on it. Let's try this again. Deformation. And mirror. Okay, there we go. So there it is. It looks like it has to be moved a little bit. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and correct that in Maya. And now we should be good. So I'm going to go ahead and go here, and I'm going to say export. I'm going to call this I1. And I'll take this one, export. I'm going to call this I2. Okay, so now if I come into, if I have multiple subtools, I'm going to kind of need kind of an intermediate program, okay, like Maya. So I'm going to go like this, file import, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in the low resolution. So if I go to, actually, hold on here. Okay, so obj L1, I'll bring that in. And by the way, I want to make sure that this is set to obj, this is single object. Import, there he is. And I want to be careful that I don't move them. Okay, I could have imported my own eyes here, but I'll just import the ones from ZBrush. So I1, import, aha, there it is. And then I'll import the other one, file, import, I2, import, and here it is. So if I select this, go modify center pivot, and just kind of reposition this. Normally you don't want to move anything here, but in this case I feel like for the eyes, I think that's fine. Let's take a look at the UVs on the eyes. Okay, so I can see that the UVs aren't really, it looks like they aren't really established. So this UV and this UV. Let me just quickly UV the eyes. I can see that that's how the face is set up. So I'm going to go like this. I'm just going to select this real quick, and I'm going to just do a quick UV map on these. UV, planar map. Okay, and then same with this one, UV, planar map. I don't really care about it right now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it here. And so I'm going to go to cut, and then I'll cut this one as well. Cut, and then I'm going to take this and this. Well, let's see. and go to unfold. Aha, there we go. And then I'm going to do the same in the other one. Modify, unfold. Excellent. And now if I take these and go to UV, modify, layout, and modify layout. Okay, cool. Now, let's take a look at what I have here. I've got, and maybe what I'll do is take both of those and go to layout. Okay, great. I've got both eyes here. And these are front of the eyes, this is the back of the eyes. But I feel like now if I undo this, I can see that I have the body in this quadrant, and then I have, if I have both eyes in this quadrant, how do we handle that in Substance Painter? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Mesh Combine for the eyes. There we go. And now I'm going to have the body as one UV set. So to do that, I'm just going to go to Assign a Lambert, and that's going to, so Assign Favorite Material Lambert. I can see that it's, I'm going to call this Lambert. I'm going to call this body material. Okay. And then for the eyes, I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to give that a different material, and that's what's going to differentiate it in Substance Painter. So I'm going to call this eye material. Okay, cool. Now, now we should be good. One last step before I bring it into Substance Painter, I want to make sure that I select this and go to Display Mesh, Soften Edge. Okay, that's going to be important. And maybe I'll soften these as well. Mesh Display, Soften Edge. Okay, excellent. Now I think that we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this, including the eyes, and File, Export Selection. And I'm going to save this as, let's see. I'm going to call this Substance Character. Few things to keep in mind is that I want it to be OBJ, and I want to make sure that materials, smoothing and normals, are checked. Smoothing and normals are going to make sure that it stays nice and smooth. Materials are going to make sure that the eyes and the body are separate. Okay, so otherwise we're going to have overlapping UVs. Okay, great. So now I'm going to hit Export Selection. Now I'm ready to begin. So now if I go into Substance Painter, I'm going to go File, New, PBR Metallic Roughness, Alpha Blend with Starter Assets. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and leave that alone. File, I'm going to go ahead and select. Now this one, I am going to only select the low resolution one. So if I come here, here it is, OBJ level 1. That's what I want. And actually, you know what? No, Substance Character, that's the low one with the eyes. Because if I just selected that one, it would not have the eyes. Okay, so now if I click Open, I'm going to set this to 4096. He's not using UDIM, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Great. Now I'm going to look at this to make sure everything is set up properly. Here's where I look at this. I can see that here's his body, and here are his eyes, okay, which are separate, which is nice. I also could go up here, and because it is separate, I can toggle the eyes on or off, okay, or I could toggle the body on or off. I don't really care about his eyes. I'd probably kind of be a little bit more careful laying those out, but I feel like for this example, I want to kind of talk more about kind of painting the body. So what I want to do is now get the high resolution baked onto this low res model. To do that, I'm going to go over here, Texture Set Settings, and then in here I'm going to go down to Bake Mesh Maps, and then I'm going to set this to maybe 4096, and then High Definition Meshes, I'm going to click right here, and now I'm going to find OBJ level 6, okay, and this did not have the eyes on, so that's good. I want to make sure that I'm on the body layer. So this is the body layer and this is the eyes. I'll click Open. And then I only want to bake it for this texture set. I don't want to bake it for the eyes, so I'm going to go to this one here. And it's going to go ahead and bake it. And it's baking everything. It's creating a normal map, a curvature map, an ambient occlusion map, and thickness, position. All of those are based on the high resolution detail. So this might take a little while. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. Okay, great. That only took maybe a minute or two. I can see it's done. And I can see that all of that detail is now on my low-res model. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And I can see that if I scroll down here, I can go to my normal map and I can see what that looks like. I can also go here and I can see my ambient occlusion map is playing off of that high resolution model. Same with the curvature and all of this other stuff, which is really cool. We'll be able to do some cool things with it. So I'm going to go back up to material, and this is probably not going to be that important for this, so I'm going to just switch this to 3D only, and now I have this. Okay, great. So now we're actually at the start of the painting portion of this lesson. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to just rename this. I'm going to call this body, and I'm going to call this eyes. There we go. So now I feel like, yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm on the body. And for painting this guy, you might say, well, hey, there's a lot of built-in materials. And these are okay. I feel like these are going to be really good for hard surface modeling. But I feel like if I'm going to do hand-painted materials, I want to use fill layers and paint layers. Okay, so I'm going to start with a fill layer. And when I click on this, I'm going to switch, I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to choose kind of like a brown material, okay? And that's the main color that I want this guy. But I can see that it looks like kind of like a chocolate bar now. And that's because of the roughness. So I'm going to bring the roughness down, basically to nothing. And I don't really want metallic, so I'm going to turn off metal. I don't want emissive, that's glowing. I don't want any transparency, so I'm going to turn off opacity. I'll leave color. I don't even need height, so just maybe color, roughness, and normal. I probably don't even need roughness and normal, but I'll just go ahead and leave it. And that's it for this layer. Okay, so I'm going to call this, base brown. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another paint layer. So I'm going to add another fill layer. And this time I'm going to call this black. And I want the black, well, first of all, let's create black. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to make it maybe not a true black. Okay, I don't want it to look like oil. So I'm going to bring the roughness way down. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off metal, emissive, opacity, okay, and height. And now to get the black into the crevices, I'm going to go into my smart masks. And I'm going to look here on these previews to look like which one is grabbing the crevices the best. So I can see like this one here. It looks like it's reaching in the crevices of that object. Or maybe even this one here is good. So if I hover over this, I'll get even a better preview. Now I kind of like this one better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop it up here. And it's going to mask it. And you can see what it did is it masked and just put the black into the crevices. By the way, if I hold down Shift and right mouse button, I can kind of rotate my lighting. Okay, that's cool. And let's say if I wanted to erase some of this. Okay, so I like how it got the crevices kind of back here, but I don't like it in some other areas. Well, what I can do is I can go to this mask and I can go to the magic wand and I can add a paint layer. When I add a paint layer, I have the opportunity to paint black or white. So if I paint, you can see if I paint white, it reveals, and if I paint black, it conceals. So I don't want to paint with such a kind of a simple brush. I want to go to my brushes, and I'm going to find something a little bit more interesting. So maybe if I come down here, I'll go to dirt spots, and now when I paint, it's going to look a little bit more natural. And I can kind of like take away stuff if I want to. Okay, and what's cool is I'm kind of like non-destructively taking this away. I feel like it feels like I've got kind of like a, I don't know, like a paint cloth or a rag, I should say, and I'm kind of like polishing this up and taking away stuff that I don't want. And what's cool is if I change my mind, I can turn this off and I'm back to where I was. And if I turn it on, that's the effect of that mask. So it's kind of a non-destructive way to affect the mask. But I can also go down to my mask. So once again, I have to be on the layer mask, but I can go down here to this, and I could change kind of how much grudge, okay. And you can see that if I want to kind of pull that up, it's going to kind of grab even more of those crevices. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that. Okay, awesome. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Kind of step out, look at that. And now I'm going to add another layer. And it kind of gets a little messy if we see all these layers. So if I click back on color, it's going to kind of collapse it. It's only when I click on the mask that it opens up. So I'm going to click back on the color. And now I'm going to create a new layer. So I'm going to click on fill layer. And this time I'm going to make it white. And then down here, I want to make sure that it's not shiny again. So I'm going to bring my roughness down. I don't care about really height, metallic, emissive, opacity. I'm just going to leave it at that. And now I'm going to go ahead and add another smart mask. So if I go here, I'm looking at this. And what I could do is, yeah, let's try this one. Yeah, we'll try that. And maybe I want the inverse of that. So if I come down here, I can click on, there's always invert, and I can say invert true. Let's see. Global invert. Okay, I kind of want this to look like it's on the high parts. I'm just going to get rid of this, and I can just right click and go to remove mask. Okay, so it's really easy to just kind of try some and see what you think. Maybe I'll try this sand. Let's see what that does. Oh, that's kind of cool. But let's say, what if I went to this and I did a global invert? Okay, I kind of like that because I want the white to be in the high parts, but I think it's too much. So what I might do is kind of bring down or maybe increase the global balance. And now I can see it's kind of hitting the top areas. I kind of like that. But I think it's too much. I mean, too white. So what I'll do is I can go to here and I can choose base color. And now I can change the opacity of base color. I want to make sure that I'm on my color here. And now I can bring the opacity down. And you can see that I can kind of just have a little hint of it. Okay, cool. So what I'm doing is I started with my base brown. And then I had my black. I had the generators kind of find where the crevices are. And then I brought my white. I had my generators find where the high parts are. And now I'm going to go ahead and kind of paint manually. So to do that, instead of a paint or a fill layer, I'm just going to add a paint layer. So if I add that, nothing has happened yet. I'm going to go to my brush. And once again, I kind of want this dirty brush, something like this. And now I'm going to go similar thought process to before. I'm just going to kind of pick a color, maybe, I don't know, maybe like a gray or something. I definitely don't want it to be shiny. And, you know, turn off metallic, emissive, all of that stuff. Maybe I'll turn off everything but color. Sometimes I like to keep roughness on because if I turn roughness off, it kind of like defaults it to roughness, to something. So now what I can do is I can come in here and I can kind of like just manually paint in areas. And I think the key to organic kind of creatures and that type of thing is to have kind of a whole mess of color, to not have it all one thing. But I feel like, once again, to the casual observer, if the casual observer sees this guy, he might say, oh yeah, that's a brown character. But I feel like to us, we're kind of thinking about it as going in with a bunch of layers of paint. And in the beginning, it's going to look like, this isn't going to work. This is kind of looking weird, and I should just give up and go home right now. But I think that if you stick with it and keep painting this, everything is going to start coming together. And then once you start kind of hiding some layers, you'll be kind of surprised on how far you've come with it. Okay, so that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of cool. That's a great kind of layer there. And I could even go in here and maybe add another kind of color. Maybe I'll kind of a green that's not that much. And maybe I want my stroke opacity to be down this time. Okay, yeah, liking that. Just kind of this gross, kind of grungy colors all over. And I think that this is what's going to kind of give this kind of the character. And maybe what I also want to do is switch my brush. So instead of just leaving it on this brush, maybe I switch to like this brush and get some kind of dots going on. Okay. Kind of liking that initial brush that I had, but I feel like don't be scared to switch stuff up. I feel like kind of the better the variation that you have, the better. By the way, control, right mouse click, I can change the size of my brush. Okay, there we go. And you can see that I'm kind of spinning my lighting around as I'm doing this. And once again, I feel like the casual observer would say, hey, this guy looks brown. But I feel like for us, we know that, you know, he's a lot of different kind of colors so far. I might think of also like fleshier areas like the belly. I maybe want to kind of take a different, you know, kind of maybe a lighter color and, whoa, maybe not that light. Maybe my stroke opacity way down on this. And kind of like hint at some kind of color there. Where I feel like maybe on the more bony areas, I might have even kind of a different color. So I'm kind of thinking about, when I'm laying in these colors, I'm kind of thinking, is it fleshy? Is it kind of muscle? Or is it kind of a bony area? And you can kind of reference images of, you know, animals and that kind of thing to really get a sense of, you know, is it, if that's what you kind of want. And then it's going to look like that paint is kind of better suited for the model. It doesn't look like it's just kind of like a random paint job. Okay, great. And you can keep adding to that. But now I'm just going to call this kind of like, I don't know, random color. Random colors. Okay, so we can maybe come back to the random colors. But now I feel like a really important one that I feel like is one of the most important ones. I'm going to do a new paint layer. And I'm going to call this roughness. Okay, the roughness, and I'm only going to paint roughness. Okay, so roughness variation is what it should be called, I guess. I'm going to turn everything off except for roughness. And I was bringing roughness all the way down, so he looks kind of really dry. But I feel like when he looks too dry like that, I feel like it feels fake and it feels computer generated. But I'm going to have kind of a dirty, once again, a dirty brush here. Maybe this one here. And now I have my roughness. So if I go up, it's going to look wet or shiny. And this one's going to look super dry. So I'm going to bring it up here. And if I paint like that, I can see when I move the lighting how much that kind of adds to it. Okay, and before I go too much farther, I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to switch this to roughness. So if I switch it to roughness, I can see that that's what I painted. So once again, black is going to be shiny, white is going to be no shine, and I feel like if you have a nice variation in roughness, it's going to look a lot better. I think that's kind of your key map that you want to make some adjustments on. So I'm going to kind of go like this, and you can see how what's neat about roughness is it's not affecting really the color. It's just affecting on how the light will respond to the model. Okay, and I think that this adds a significant level of realism. And I feel like sometimes it's so subtle you can't even really notice it until you kind of move the model. So I feel like the fact that Substance Painter is a real-time viewport where we can see that instantly is really important for something like a roughness map. And then also, this is where I feel like it starts to separate itself from a program like ZBrush. So in ZBrush, it does allow you to paint materials. However, you can't export those materials. where this roughness map and all these materials we can export directly out of Substance. And maybe I'd come here and also kind of like paint, you know, the toenail. I don't want to make it look too perfect, but I feel like things like toenails, and I can also turn on my symmetry here. And if I turn on symmetry, now I can paint like these fingernails. Okay, cool. And now maybe I turn symmetry off. You might be saying, well, why didn't I have symmetry on the rest of the time, or why did I turn it off? And I think that for organic characters, we don't want it to be super obvious that it is symmetrical. Now, if I'm getting kind of too crazy here, I could kind of bring my roughness down with the same brush and kind of paint over it, and it's going to kind of help even add more, once again, more variation. So I can start to see that. And if I look at my roughness map, now I'm getting some nice variation. You can see I don't have much variation on the back yet, but I feel like just for sake of time, you should kind of go all over your model with roughness. And I feel like even having more variation than this is even better. It's one of those subtlety things, but I think that subtlety goes a long way. Okay, especially on, you know, organic characters like this. Now I feel like let's not forget that we could kind of continue to model on this guy. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to click on this paintbrush, and I'm going to call this moles. Okay, now I'm going to find kind of a better brush. So if I go to alphas, let me see. I could find like maybe just something like this. And now I'm going to, on this, I don't want any roughness. I just want, well, roughness I want to bring all the way down. There we go. Color, maybe I want these moles to be kind of like really, really dark. Okay. And I do want there to be height. So I'm going to put height on. I'm going to bring height over a little bit. That's going to produce a normal map, so I want normal on as well. And now I can come in here, and I could stamp that on. Okay. So now kind of bring this down, stamp that. And what's neat about this is that the color is matching it exactly too. Okay, so once again, the color is going to be right along with it. I can see that it's sticking up. It's not symmetrical. And maybe it's going to be obvious if I keep using that same alpha, so maybe I kind of switch to some others. Okay, so I'm kind of thinking about adding some of these kind of moles on there, and maybe I switch the color too, to just kind of have some fun with it and make some maybe lighter ones. I don't know. I mean, you can see how you can kind of get, it's kind of up to you on what you want to do with it. So that's my moles layer. And by the way, just so we understand here, watch this. We'll zoom in on this mole here. If I change this slider right here, you can see that that changes the color of it, but nothing else. And why is it not changing anything else? It's because this is set to base color. Watch if I switch this to height. Now this slider is going to change the height of it, not the color. So if I took the height down and the color, okay, you can see that now it's pretty much away. So I want you to realize that these sliders, the slider is based on whatever is set here, okay? If I have roughness on it, you can see that I can kind of change the shine to it as well. And I'm only going to be able to adjust whatever I had available for it here. And by the way, it is affecting the entire layer. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this is if I go to my eraser, and now if I erase, okay, it'll erase the whole thing. But if I just had color, whoa, let me see. Yeah, so if I have, let me see, color, it's going to erase color. But if I have height, let me see here. So now, okay, so hold on. It's going to, I'm telling it not to erase height, okay? But if I tell it to erase height and color, Oh no, so it's not affecting either of those. If I had them both on, it's going to affect both of them. So I'm going to say I don't want it to affect color. Now I can erase everything but color. I don't want it to affect height. Now I'm just erasing the color. So you can kind of see that. Or I could just, I don't want it to affect roughness. Oh, but it affected the other two. So this is kind of what my eraser is affecting. And now one other thing here, if I go to another layer, so I'm going to add another paint layer. I'm going to call this cuts. And now if I go to my brush here, or maybe even my alphas, let me see if I go to my alphas and find something that looks more like a cut. Let's see. So, I don't know, maybe even like this. Okay, well, that looks more like a splatter. Here's, this might look like a cut. There we go. Now I feel like I'm going to have this to be dark red. Maybe come down here. There we go. I want this to be height. I want it to be in, so it looks like it cut the skin. And I want it to be rough. Okay, I want it to be, or no roughness, so it's nice and wet. Okay, so now that's all I want. And now if I click on that, well, let's see here. Now I can see that when I move this, I can see that, yeah, that looks like that cut is shiny, wet, and digging into the skin. And I feel like that's the kind of stuff that, you know, once again, that variation, that's also playing into my roughness map quite a bit, which is cool. And I could, once again, adjust the height of it, the roughness of it, the color of it, and I could kind of play all those things together. So, some really cool stuff here. So to just kind of recap on some of the concepts that I talked about here is we started with a base brown, and if I maybe take all these off, you can see how simple it started. Then I did black, but I used the smart mask to kind of reach the crevices and kind of do the heavy lifting for us. Then I added white, and I faded it a little bit, so you can see that once again I have the generators kind of finding the areas for us. And then I added manually kind of just random color, and you can see how that starts to add a lot of detail. Then adding roughness variation is what's going to kind of make it look a lot more real, less computer generated, a lot more natural. Then the moles are going to be kind of this idea of, hey, I can kind of continue modeling and then adding color, so it's not, the modeling isn't finished in ZBrush, the modeling is kind of finished here. And then the cuts, same thing, but the moles were digging in, and the cuts now are digging, or the moles are sticking up and the cuts are digging in. So hopefully that was helpful, and have any questions, just leave them below, and we'll see you guys next time.